We rise to welcome our guests on the dais.
Good evening, everyone.
Good. Thank you. I extend my very warm welcome to all the guests present here for the prestigious Swami Vivekananda Memorial Lecture. Swami Vivekananda Memorial Lecture celebrates the thoughts and learnings on leadership which inspires millions. For leadership, various qualities though need to be nurtured. The great leaders emerge encompassing various qualities, some of them as mentioned in this shloka, Udyamaha, Sahasam, Dhairya, Buddhi, Shakti, Prakramah, Shadete Yatra Vidyante Tatra Devah Sahayakam. Means expertise, courage, patience, intelligence, power, and might are 6 qualities that even the gods helps those who possess them. These qualities are the hallmark of leadership. To celebrate leadership, it is an honor and a privilege for VIPs to host these lectures each year. This year, the topic of the lecture is 75 years of nation building, role of military leadership. We owe to Swami Vivekananda for the thoughts which he has sown and grown in our hearts through his teachings, and bow to our armed forces who walk the tough path. To speak on this topic, we have with us and we welcome Lieutenant General C.P. Mohanty, PVSM, AVSM, SM, VSM, ADC. We welcome you, sir. Please put your hands together. I would now invite Vice Chairman, VIPS chain of institutions, Mr. Suneet Vats. Mr. Suneet Vats is the co-founder and Vice Chairman of Strength India Educational Society, under whose aegis Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies and Delhi School of Business function. He did his master's from an Ivy League university, Columbia Business School, ranked 10th in the world. His first master's was from Narsi Munji Institute of Management Studies, Mumbai. He started as an entrepreneur and worked with Jindal Steel in Odisha and Indian Oil and Bharat Petroleum Corporation, handling supply chain and logistics. However, conceding to the spiritual calling, he joined his father 21 years ago to launch Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies from the scratch. While being involved in pursuing life's spiritual goals, he did not lose focus on academic empowerment and enrichment. And over the past 2 decades, he has attended courses at INSEAD Business School, Columbia Business School, Wharton Business School, MIT, and MIT Sloan Business School. He is now pursuing an MBA in data sciences from his alma mater, Narsi Munji Institute of Management. Besides the rich learning experience, these programs have offered Mr. Vats access to the world-class faculty and an unmatched exposure and experience. Most importantly, it has helped him meet up the wonderful cohorts from diverse cultural and organizational backgrounds, adding to his social capital. Mr. Suneet Vats believes in philosophy that learning is the key, that learning is also a lifelong process, and that one should unlearn, learn, and relearn in life to stay productive and relevant. But before I invite Shri Suneet Vats, we would like to show a short video capturing essence of WIPS and the Vivekananda Memorial Lecture. Please play the video.
It was in the year 1997 that my father, Dr. S.C. Watts, met Swami Vivekananda ji, an eminent educationist, management expert, author of books Modern Physics and Vedanta and Indian Ethos in Management, an active social worker and the editor of Prabudh Bharat, Awakened India, a journal started by Swami Vivekananda. At this meeting, the respected seer almost gave a diktat to set up an institute for higher learning in the capital city of India, in the name of Swami Vivekananda, a prophet and a pathfinder. Thus came into the existence the idea of setting up Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies, VIPS. Over the past 24 years, VIPS with its sister verticals has indeed emerged both as a major and a respected center of higher learning. All through these years, we have kept Swami Vivekananda's vision of man-making, character building, nation building as our guiding principle. To mark Swami Vivekananda's birth anniversary and or anniversary of his Chicago address every year, we invite a person of eminence to deliver Swami Vivekananda annual lecture and also felicitate a person who has served the society selflessly for Vivekananda Lifetime Achievement Award. We at the VIPS strongly believe that learning from your life's journey would add great value to education we impart within our precincts. Your presence would be cherished by the students, faculty and the management of the institute.
I welcome and invite Shri Suneet Vats to deliver the welcome address. Please, sir.
Thank you, Charu ma'am. I think it's indeed a pleasure for us and an honor to welcome our chief guest today, Lieutenant General C.P. Mohanty ji. This would be, I think, the fifth eminent guest to deliver this lecture. Others in that, eminent list includes people like Narayan Murthy ji, who had come and blessed us. Then there were Kapil Sibal ji, not in his capacity as a politician, but more so in his capacity as a legal expert and a legal, illuminary. I would, sir, welcome you on behalf of the management, the faculty, and the students. Unfortunately, the students have not been able to, use this occasion to benefit from your lecture. Otherwise, I think the insights that would have been shared by you on leadership would have really inspired. And we look forward to, somebody in the armed forces as senior as you, to give out those leadership tips and those management skills that are required. Because whatever we learned, in management school, I'm myself a management graduate. I know what we learn is something more, would say a textbook answer to what you people maybe live it day in, day out. And the courage and the valor that, is exhibited by our armed forces is something which cannot be matched. So I thank you profusely for accepting our, invitation and sparing time on a Sunday, that too on a Sunday. Many dignitaries sitting in front are from armed forces. Some of us have, people, faculty members who are present here from the Vivekananda Institute. I thank Siddharth sir, because had he not been there, I think the entire conceptualization and this event would not have been possible. And I think credit goes to him largely. Then supported by Dean and the faculty who have organized this. We have two more people which I would like to mention here, because Professor Venkat Rao sir, who has been with National Law University, Bangalore as the Vice Chancellor, he is the leading light and a legal, leading light of this country, and I would say a jewel crest for this country when it comes to legal expertise. And I think he's too humble, and I requested him to be on the dais with sir, but then he declined to that. Coming to, the journey that we have been through, and there were small, axiomatic, phrases which my father used to tell me when I used to ask him as to why, what motivated you to, build an institution in the name of Swamiji. Because my suggestions were, we'll call it Institute of Professional Studies. He said, no, it has to be Vivekananda. Otherwise, I'm not going to start anything. Because his, the initiation into the order and his going to Mayavati, I don't know how many of you have visited Mayavati ashram, which is an Advaita ashram which was set up because when Swamiji returned from his, after delivering his lecture in 1893, 1899 was the time when he wanted to set up with that burning desire in him that he wanted 10 to 12, individuals who had the nerves of steel, muscles of iron, and in which dwelled the mind which was made up of thunderbolt. And he said that give me, those 12, people with that strength of character, and I will be able to change this country into what people would, possibly want this to be. And that what possibly inspired my father. I think it was a divine, ordained, sir, that either deliberately, maybe Swamiji took him there, Jitatmananji Maharaj, who himself was a MA Physics from Presidency College. He took him there. They, spent a couple of days into deep meditation and contemplation, wanting to understand what should be the institution character all about. And 21 years of our journey has been all about, churning out not just, students, but then people. Our motto is man-making, character building, nation building, which largely, focuses its energies on, having something which is to do with, the nation and the spirit of nationalism that we say. We have beautiful lessons from armed forces to learn. They say Namak, Naam, Namak, and Nishan, which is the honor code for the armed forces. And they kind of, either live and die with it. And that's what we need to understand. Fine, we as civilians, we understand, there is a certain, but then there's no sense of discipline, no sense of responsibility, which is visible at times. And largely when we see, places around us, especially corporates, there's a lot of, lack of leadership in terms of the vision that they need to create. I was, browsing through, having done a lot of, research on the topic as I have to speak today. I was trying to justify my existence here on the stage and trying to prove that no, there are, very good insights offered by Swami Vivekananda ji when it comes to leadership. So few of his thoughts that I would like to share with everybody here and how it got reflected, because Jack Welch, which was, CEO of GE, he said a leader should have the ability to have a vision, communicate that vision to its people, and at the same time have, the capability to deliver that vision. And this is what happened, in fact, when 2000 was the time, and 97 was the time, in fact, to be very honest, where my father founded this education society. It was called Strength India Society. And the strength abbreviated stands for, Society for Total Revival of National Glory and the True Heritage of India. So there was a purpose behind, his doing things in the way that he went about doing things. And I don't want to self-tempt here about, what VIPS is all about or what my father stood for. But today is his 75th birthday also. So this occasion kind of, befits the kind of, the homage that I can pay to him, my reverence to him. And no other than Sir has kind of, his consent is like a, God's blessing to us, I would say. Swamiji went on and talked a lot about, he was a Karam Yogi, and so I see all people in armed forces to be Karam Yogis, because there's a lot of detachment which comes, through the forces that we work through. There's people move from one position to another, they care little about their own lives, which is kind of, amazing to see when it comes to, because there is a fear. And when I was listening to one of the lectures of Sir Manik Shaw, he said there was, after the war with Bangladesh, I had, somebody as my help who was Swan Singh, he said, and Swan Singh, I kind of denied his, promotion. And when I came back, somebody told me that he's going to kill you today. And he goes on to quote that example that I was quite fearful because he was a 6.5 feet guy. And I was kind of mortified that today is going to kill me. But then he says that I mustered that courage, called him into my own tent and told him, Ki, Swan Singh, you want to kill me? Here is the gun. Shoot me right away. And he said his hands were shaking. He said that was the moral courage that I had, though it was stupidity at that point of time, he admitted to it very candidly. But he said, no, but then there and then, if I did not exhibit that kind of courage, my entire, Paltan would have said, Saab ghabra gaye. And this is where, those are things where you look for, courage in certain examples around you. As I said, Swamiji was a Karam Yogi. He never attached himself to any position. And the order that he formed, which unfortunately became a cult of some sort, but still exhibits, interesting leadership insights as to what needs to be done. So he had this formula of rotation of, authority, where no single person would get the power, as he would possibly say that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So he had that provision within the, mutt that he founded. It's an interesting lesson. Why? Because he said we have to move people from being, dependent to independent to interdependent. And that's his philosophy of, leadership that he kind of propounded, that we need to have leadership which cares for others, is more socially oriented, and not focused on selfish gains. And I think our armed forces, all three divisions of the armed forces exhibit that kind of leadership in its, may it be at the lower level or at the top level. So interesting, coincidences and kind of, things that emerge. We at VIPS also, kind of got into that mode where, we thought of the administrative structure to be something which is more supportive of people, of their capabilities, and yet, have some amount of detachment inbuilt into it. Why? Because as Swamiji has said that, we can't fulfill anything till the time you are filled with greed. So that part has to be done away with completely. So man-making, character building, and yes, there was one important aspect to his leadership style, that was servant leadership. He said that we should be servants, serving, people, rather than have our own vested interest at his prime, thing. And the same thing which I found accidentally when I was researching on that topic further, Robert Greenleaf, he was a well-known, management expert, had, given out this idea in the year 1970 itself. So you look at the correlation of great thinkers and the great minds, how they kind of, think on the same lines, and, offer you a leadership solution. And the problems that we see today, what we saw possibly in Afghanistan, the way US left people in lurch, and those assets may be used or misused in times to come. I think people from the armed forces know it better as to what would be strategic, or is it a catastrophe wanting to happen in that particular area or region. I'll take few more minutes because, again, one more management expert, Larry C. Spears, proposed, 10 characteristics of a leader, servant leadership. He said, listening, empathy, healing, one's own self. It's not about one's own self in terms of its selfishness, but about, getting the best out of yourself. Because as Swamiji said, each soul is potentially divine. So it meant that one needs to, explore deeper into answers for life, difficult problems and solutions. So you have to kind of, work on yourself all day along rather than look for outside. Persuasion, conceptualization, foresightedness, stewardness, commitment, and above all, the growth of everyone around themselves. So it has that beautiful, conception of where I grow and everybody else grows with me. So those are very important lessons, when it comes to Swamiji. 4 paths he possibly, preached: Gyan Yoga, Dharam Yoga, Gyan Yoga, Karam Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and your Raj Yoga. If we deeply analyze and when we put it into practice in Vivekananda Institute, it possibly means, something telling students to think more logically, have that sense of discrimination in them inbuilt, so that they do not get carried away by emotions, purely emotions. Psychic control was his main, if you can control your psyche, because somewhere, he has quoted, Jaisa Raja Tatha Praja, Tatha Raja, meaning as the leader is, so would be its followers. Meaning that one has to exemplify first, his own behavior has to be, vouched for before he starts, giving out sermons to others. And that's a very important thing. Devotion for emotional health. He doesn't mean devotion in terms of devotion to God, as we normally assume that to be. Devotion, he meant that it has to be emotional health also, because you have to be emotionally balanced. So emotional quotient come into play, and we have to understand what emotional quotient is all about. Daniel Goleman has written a lot about it, and people who understand that part know how important, EQ has become. It has become, it has taken precedence over IQ. Because in a war-like situation, I can understand if you're not with your, the soldier buddy who's there, you need that courage and an emotional, balancing within yourself to take somebody out of that danger zone. So I think those are very important lessons to be learned. Karam Yoga, again, as I said, selfless work, and Ramakrishna order has this, very beautiful, motto which says, Atmano mokshartham jagat hitaicha. So work for self-salvation, self-liberation, not in terms of what we assume in a spiritual sense of it, but again, it's unfolding of your own character, your own personality, refining your own self or your own persona, and then working for the world at large. With those words, I think, sir, I once again express my deep sense of gratitude to you for having accepted this invitation, and we look forward to your words of wisdom, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for opening the session with very thoughtful words and taking us through the journey of whips and the ideals of Swami Vivekananda and also of the armed forces. May I now request the Vice Chairman, Mr. Suneet Vats, the Speaker, Lieutenant General C.P. Mohanty, and the host of the evening, Professor Siddharth Mishra, to launch the centenary edition of the Rimkolian magazine. This magazine is being released here for three main reasons today. One, it features our speaker on the cover. Second, WIPS entered into partnership for this particular issue. And thirdly, Professor Mishra publishes the magazine on behalf of the Alumni Association of the prestigious Rashtriya Indian Military College in Dehradun. And it so happens that both General Mohanty and Professor Mishra are proud alumni of this century-old institution, the cradle of military leadership. A large number of alumni members are present here today in this auditorium. Thank you. It is indeed my proud privilege and honor on behalf of WIPS to invite Lieutenant General Mohanty to deliver Swami Vivekananda Memorial Lecture 2021. Lieutenant General Chandi Prasad Mohanty, PVSM, AVSM, SM, VSM, the current Vice Chief of Army Staff, was born to Mr. Jitendra K. Mohanty, a civil servant, and Mrs. Sharda Mohanty, a professor of Odia at SVM College. Following his primary education at Bagshai UP School at Jajpur in Orissa, the general joined the prestigious Rashtriya Indian Military College, Dehradun. This school, started by Prince of Wales in 1922, is to complete 100 years next year. It's a matter of great pride for the school that in its centenary year, Lieutenant General C.P. Mohanty is the senior-most serving officer of this nursery of producing general officers. The general from RIMC entered the National Defense Academy and was commissioned into the Rajput Regiment in 1982 after completing the pre-commission training at Indian Military Academy. He holds an MPhil and Masters in Management and has conducted extensive studies of China, South Asia, and Northeastern India. He is an alumnus of Defense Services Staff College, Wellington, Higher Defense Management College, Secunderabad, and National Defense College, New Delhi. In a career spanning 4 decades, he has served across a wide spectrum of conflict and terrain profiles and tenanted a host of command, staff, and instructional appointments. He commanded a battalion on line of control in Jammu and Kashmir, and later in the Northeast. He has the unique distinction of commanding 2 brigades, first on line of actual control, and later on the multinational UN brigade in Democratic Republic of Congo. Lieutenant General Mohanty later commanded the Rangia-based division in a counter-insurgency environment and the Sikkim-based Tri-Shakti Corps immediately after the Doklam incident. The general officer has a unique distinction of commanding 2 administrative formations as well, the Jodhpur sub-area as a major general and the Uttar Bharat area as a lieutenant general. Having enjoyed an instructional tenure at the National Defense Academy, General Mohanty in a recent interview said that if he was not strategizing for army, he would have been probably in the realm of academics. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Lieutenant General C.P. Mohanty. Welcome, sir.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Shri Sunit Vats, Vice Chairman, VIPS, Professor Siddharth Mishra, and my distinguished audience. I cannot resist the temptation of addressing you as my brothers and sisters, invoking the famous address of Swami Vivekananda of 1893, when he endeared the whole world to India, and he becomes a symbol and epitome of public speaking. It's a very special day for me because in front of me I have my own seniors from the RIMC and the academies that we've been educated in, who have shaped what we are today. It makes me a little nervous because once I get out of here, I've got to answer them why I spoke what. So please bear with me, my seniors from the school, and I hope I will live up to your expectations. I wish to thank Mr. Sunit Vats and Professor Siddharth Mishra for having invited me, having given me this honor to address after a long hiatus of only virtuals for the first real address this year for me at least. So far it has only been in the realms of the webinars. Rather than just giving a monologue, I have chosen to take you through various pictorials so that at least I showcase to you what Indian armed forces have done for the nation building in the last 75 years. During this period, and I would also urge the audience, if anyone is not able to see, you may like to change your positions if you wish to. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to quote this famous words of Kautilya: the Mauryan soldier does not himself the royal treasuries enrich, nor does he the royal granaries fill. The soldier only and merely ensures that he is thus the very basis and silent, barely visible, cornerstone of our fame, culture, physical well-being and prosperity. In short, the entire nation building activity. During the olden times, the kings, the monarchy, they led the armies. But as we came to the modern times, because of the complexities of the battlefield, the roles were bifurcated. The governance, the administration was left to the monarchy, where the generals were responsible for the security. They led the troops to the war. However, not long back, there were also commonalities in both the roles. We know about Eisenhower, Emperor Hirohito, and Hitler. And closer home, even Subhash Bose was also a combination of both the roles. Look at this map of India. When we talk about the role of the armed forces, since the independence, if it were not for the armed forces, the country would have looked something like this. Multiple countries. The challenges were that 560 princely states which had to be brought into the one common flag of India, the Union of India. Had it not for the armed forces, some places they were physically launching attacks, carrying out invasions. In some places, the mere threat of an invasion forced the smaller states to come under the flag of the Indian Union. Some of the states where the forcible unification had to take place by use of the Indian armed forces were in Jammu and Kashmir, Goa, Junagadh, and Hyderabad. I would take you to this particular diagram. This I have borrowed from the National Defense College. This talks about comprehensive national power and also the comprehensive national security, which is an essence of comprehensive national power. The rest of the elements can only happen if the security is ensured. What is central is the security and the peace of the nation. It is the military which ensures, it is the security forces which ensure this. Growth comes, development comes only with security. There are many examples wherein the growth cannot happen without peace. Now, what is the role of our military in national interest? It is also called, in other words, the Brahmastra, the final answer for everything. At the beginning, it has got to fill the national security objectives, strengthen the social fabric by being part of the national building. It has to uphold the role of rule of law, ensure the constitutional and political supremacy. That's what Indian armed forces have done without having any personal aspirations. Because of which the economy has been built, they have been part and parcel of the building of the economy and furtherance of our diplomatic aims. As I go along, you will understand what has been the role of the armed forces in the diplomatic circuit. Peace. Now, why is peace important? How is peace ensured? It is the role of the armed forces to ensure peace, whether it is external aggression or internal disorders. And peace can only come to you with power. It can only come in case the war is avoided. You do not have to fight the war every time. That leads to development, that leads to progress. It is the most important instrument of ensuring peace. Quite often we are asked that it is a wasteful expenditure for the country to spend so much of money for the armed forces. 2.15% of the GDP, 4.7 lakh crores worth of taxpayers' money, which goes for maintaining huge standing armed forces. But without that, there would be no peace. There would be no security in the country. I would also take you through some examples. US, it spends many more times of what India spends. They do not have any threat to the security. However, this is an instrument of power projection. Similarly, look at Israel. If they they did not have strong armed forces, a technologically advanced armed forces, they would have been decimated long back. They would have never remained a nation state. Look at Russia. What happened to the country? From USSR, the country got disintegrated. If Tibet had a strong armed forces, they would have never been invaded. Look at Afghanistan. If there was peace, there would have been prosperity. Iraq is yet another example. It is a country's armed forces which defend it. I would give you also two examples since we made a mention about Congo. Congo is again very, very rich in natural resources, but it has not been able to progress. It is because there is internal turmoil. But you look at yet another country, South Africa, equally rich, but because of the peace and prosperity, this country is progressing. It is one of the most leading developed nations of the world. There are two stark realities as I draw this particular, show you this diagram. The external peace and internal stability. Can you imagine India being such a state with, such a nation state with a population? You would have also heard the Prime Minister speak yesterday. In the entire world, there is one Indian in every 6 global population. Why is it that there is no bomb blasts? Have you heard about any bomb blast in the recent past? Is it happening naturally? You go to Sarojini Market, go to any of the malls. It is so easy to do it. But why doesn't it happen? Because there are some forces who are continuously working behind the scene. That's the reason there is peace and tranquility in the nation today. And believe me, I am not talking about only the armed forces. I'm talking about all the security apparatus that are working towards it. Looking at the power projection, imagine if you had lost some of the wars that the armed forces have fought. Jammu and Kashmir, 1947, 48, 65, 71. We did lose one war. What happened to India's prestige in the world? In the very recent past, if we did not have the armed forces, if the country did not invest in the security, we would have probably lost the war in Kargil. Doklam would have been lost. Galwan war would have been lost. Even in the IS situation, the internal security, Jammu and Kashmir would have been in turmoil. The Northeast would have been in turmoil. Punjab and Naxals would be having a field day. What has happened in the recent past in 2017, the incident in Doklam, where I have commanded the corps, and also in Galwan. This has not only enhanced the prestige of the nation, but it has also given us a big stature in the international arena. Today, everyone talks about India as a net security provider. It is a security umbrella against a very big nation. So it is India who is being looked at by all other nations, not only regional but also extra-regional. We are also the symbols of national integration. We rise above language, we rise above ethnicity, we rise above caste, creed, and everything. Very interestingly, I belong to Odisha, but I happen to be the head of the Rajput regiment. Similarly, the Chief of Army Staff, who is from Maharashtra, is the head of the Sikhalai regiment. A Sikh officer is the colonel of the regiment of Madras regiment. A South Indian officer, General P.G.K. Menon, is the colonel of the regiment of the Sikh regiment. This is the kind of integration that we have in the armed forces. In Indian armed forces, we have Muslim CEOs and the Christian CEOs sitting as karta in our havans. The Hindu officers go and attend namaz, attend the church services, and in every institution today, we have something called as a Sarv Dharm Sthal, where all the religions are given equal respect. And it is not only during the service, it is also beyond the service. Our veterans are once again the symbols of integrity, jointness, and symbol of how we live together, irrespective of caste and creed. I, for once, even I have shared the same plate with all my friends from irrespective of their religion. We never thought about it. There have been Muslim officers who have been keeping fast on the Hindu ceremonies, the celebrations, and I personally also kept fast during the month of Ramzan. So that is the way we function in the armed forces. This is where the integration comes. Talking about the nature of the armed forces, what makes the Indian armed forces so special? It is our apolitical character. I am reminded of the famous words of Sam Manekshaw, the field marshal, the famous field marshal. He had famously told Mrs. Indira Gandhi, "Sweetie, I have a long nose." He used to call her sweetie because they had the common family background. "I have a long nose, but I don't poke my nose into your affairs." On the contrary, look at Pakistan. Ayub Khan, Yahya Khan, Ziaul Haq, Parvez Musharraf. You imagine where the countries are today. Where is Pakistan? Where is India? Myanmar, the similar situation is ongoing. Bangladesh has had, on 2 occasions, the military leaders are the martial law administrators or the president subsequently. But today, when there is a civilian leadership, the country is prospering. Iraq, Libya, there have been other examples wherein the military leaders have had political aspirations. We in India, the Indian armed forces, have no such aspirations. We respect the political system. We have ourselves ensured free and fair elections in Jammu and Kashmir, Assam, Northeast, and numerous occasions. Our institutions are cradles of leadership. What is taught to us are qualities of leadership. There are attributes that are seen in us, there are qualities that are seen in us for the leadership. Some of the most important qualities that we are expected to nurture and imbibe are integrity, loyalty to the nation and to our regiments and the battalions that we belong to, courage, and that also includes courage of conviction, dependability in every sphere, decisiveness in the most difficult positions to take decision and definite decisions, selflessness. And as you look at the Chetwood motto, it says it all. The nation comes first, then come the men we command, and last and least is our own comfort. Naam, Namak and Nishan. you just heard Mr. Vatt speak about it. This is truly the name of our nation, the name of our country. Namak is once again is the symbol of loyalty to our nation, and Nishan is the flag for which we lay down our lives. These words of Chetwood, which were spoken in 1932, they still hold good today, so many years, even nearly going to be 100 years now. National Defense Academy has the insignia Seva Paramo Dharma. My own school, we started with Ishteen, which means I serve. Today we write Bal Vivek, and that is for a boy who is just 11 years old. That is where the leadership starts. These are the cradles of leadership that we have. And I can go on and on about the examples of leadership, but I would like to just flag some of them. Here is one picture of Thakur Nathu Singh. He was a lieutenant general. Why I quote his example? That he had refused to be the army chief. How many of us can do that? He is from my regiment, the Rajput regiment. That is the time Pandit Nehru was looking for a new chief for the armed forces after Sir Francis Butcher, who was the last CNC of the British Armed Forces. He commented that we need to continue with the British because I do not have any Indian general who has the experience. And that is the time General Thakur Nathu Singh is quoted to have said, if that was the consideration, then in that case we should be also looking at British PM for our nation. And then that is the time when Pandit Nehru asked him that why don't you lead the army? He says, no, I am not the senior most in the army. This credit must go to my senior, who is a more capable person. And that is how came our first CNC, Field Marshal K.M. Cariappa. The day he took over, on 15 January 1949, the same day, Sir Francis Butcher handed over the command to him, and he has taken some very tough decisions. We talk about it today. He had volunteered to reduce the pay and allowances of the entire Indian Army, even including rations, he had accepted for a cut. In 1965, when his own son, he had already retired by then, when his own son, then Wing Commander K.C. Cariappa, and later on who retired as Air Marshal, when he was a prisoner of war, that is the time General Ayub Khan had offered to release him, and after it was adequately publicized in the media that they have the son of the then retired General Cariappa in their custody, he had offered to release him. That is the time Field Marshal Cariappa, then General Cariappa, had politely refused. He says, no, my son will not be released. He will only be released with all other PWs. And he says that all the PWs must be treated like my son is treated and vice versa. Now these are the character qualities which need no further elaboration. Field Marshal Cariappa too was from my regiment, the Rajput regiment. I come to General Thimaya, who is from my school, my alma mater. He was the only Indian brigade commander to have commanded an infantry brigade in World War II in Burma. He had a conflict with then Defense Minister V.K. Krishnamenon. He had offered to resign, but he was requested to continue by the Prime Minister Pandit Nehru because some changes were not accepted, and he handed over just before the Indochina War to General Thapar. Another unsung hero, or I would say that relatively unknown person, is General Sagat Singh. General Sagat Singh has never lost a war, right from the liberation of Goa, and also his contributions in Leh Ladakh. In fact, a very less known war was the war in 1967 in Natula, wherein we had given a bloody nose to the Chinese. This is where This was something which came at the wake of 1962. Chinese thought that this time also they could defeat Indian army. But this didn't happen because of the leadership of General Sagat Singh. Similarly, during the liberation of Goa, there was a price on his head by government of Portugal, $10,000 in those days. And he played a stellar role as a corps commander of 4 Corps for the liberation of Bangladesh. And you can see him standing in the center in the surrender ceremony in that picture. Here is one person, Mahendranath Malla, who was decorated as MVC, Mahavir Chakra, posthumous. He chose to go down with a ship which was sunk INS Kukri during December 71. And last seen, he was, as the eyewitnesses say, he was sitting on a chair and coolly smoking a cigar on the sinking ship. That is the highest traditions of gallantry. He chose to go down with a ship. Air Marshal Arjun Singh, who later on became the Marshal of the Air Force, the third CNC of the Air Force, who led the Air Force during 1965 operations, an epitome of value and integrity. Another hero is Flying Officer Nirmal Singh Sekhon. He had shot down 6 Pak jets and he himself was martyred in this battle. He was awarded Paramveer Chakra posthumous. I would also like to draw your attention to a very recent happening of Abhinandan Vartman, Wing Commander Abhinandan Vartman, who chased a plane into the territories of Pakistan and he was downed. But you all have heard the story as to how he held his head high and he became a symbol for the youth of today. And he is one person who held the nation together. And there are also famous stories as to how Pakistan was forced to release him. Otherwise, they knew that India would surely attack Pakistan. And that is how he was returned with dignity. A man of 1,000 words, 1,000 quotes, a man with a rare sense of wit. 5 wars, a veteran of the 5 wars, taken 9 bullets, loved by the troops, and also a kind of maverick general. 62 operations, he took over 4 Corps, almost at the fag end. He had famously quoted, "I have arrived. There will be no withdrawal without written orders. And as long as I am here, those orders will never come." That is the way he had given the courage to the Indian troops to fight on. He had also said, if there is someone who says that he is not afraid of death, either he has to be a Gorkha or he is lying. Talking about fear for death, I think it comes once in our life. I myself, I can quote my own example. When I was a battalion commander on the line of control in the Op Parakram, there used to be heavy shelling every day. I was genuinely worried about the safety of my troops because I had seen people falling because of the enemy's fire. But that is the time I read a famous book called Autobiography of a Yogi by Swami Paramahansa Yogananda. That is one book which gave me so much of inspiration to understand that death is nothing to be afraid of. It is merely liberation from a body. And thereafter, I have not looked back. And I dare say that I don't have to be a Gurkha to not to be afraid of death. Similarly, in the 71 war, you all know that he had refused to go to war when he was asked to go to war till the time the entire armed forces and the army is not fully prepared. And once the army was prepared, that was one of the rare feat to bring to the knees 93,000 troops and liberation of Bangladesh as the end. he has been the legendary general of the Indian Armed Forces who will continue to inspire generations to come. Why only the past? I would also talk about it. This tradition of gallantry even exists today. Look at these famous words from these young men who died during the 1999 Kargil operations. That they kept the entire country united. And the famous saying of Captain Vikram Batra, या तो मैं तिरंगा लहरा के आऊंगा या उसमें लिपट के आऊंगा पर आऊंगा जरूर. And the famous quote also, ये दिल मांगे मोर, after I had captured a famous peak. So these are the famous, the heroes of ours who have inspired even today's generation. This was the first drawing room war. We all saw the war on our TV screens. Now, talking about these men, I would also talk little about my own personal experience. I was the Congo Brigade Commander, Multinational Forces. We were climbing up to a live volcano, Nyaragongo. We were hit by a swarm of bees. About thousands of them were there. And we started getting evacuated by our own helicopters, and hats off to those helicopter pilots who were once again the Indian helicopter pilots. They were hovering on the stony patches, picking us up, all the casualties who were there, because most of us are hit with about 200 or 300 bee stings, and my deputy was also from my school that time. And when everybody was already evacuated, that is the time, my own troops started saying, sir, you also go back. Sir, you also get into the helicopter and move. But somewhere that time, there was an intuition. I said, no, I will not get evacuated. I said, first of all of you, I'll be the last one to be evacuated. Something also, I remembered those examples of Captain Malla that time. I said, I should be the first one to leave this place. But that is the time I just realized that the boy who was leading us, where is he? I didn't know. And everyone was looking at one another's face. I said, I am not going without him. Either you find out where he is, otherwise I am not going out from here. That is the time just one captain of 18 Madras, he just looked at me. He just snatched a blanket from one of the boys who was traveling with us. He wrapped himself in the blanket and just went into the swarm of the bees. And about 5 minutes later, he had on his shoulder this boy who had fainted. And I think if I had gone down that day, today I wouldn't have been standing in front of you with my head held high. I would have always held myself responsible for the death of that boy. And had he not been evacuated that day, we would have lost him definitely. Now look at this picture. This is the picture of June 15, 2020. All of you are familiar with that. This is the example of the Battle of Galwan. Colonel Santosh Babu, it is not that the officers only lead the men. It is the inspired men who follow the leader, knowing fully well that they're getting into the jaws of death. If you look at it, Colonel Santosh Babu is from southern part of India. However, he was commanding the troops from Bihar. But if you see the martyrs list, it has got some Sikh boys. When this incident was taking place, the boys had gone because they suddenly realized that the CO's life was in danger. They rushed to the rescue of the CO. And CO had some men, but they went on to reinforce them. And when the numbers were lesser, the nearby units, the Punjabi unit, the artillery unit, these boys, the Sikh boys, they also rushed. We had 20 men who were martyred in this operation, but that was the integration between these officers and men. Our young officers of today are indeed symbols of gallantry. The manner in which we have seen them in the Kargil operations and even the Galwan and in Doklam, every place, even if a bullet is not flying, They're the ones who are leading from the front, all our troops. Similarly, when they lead from the front, our troops also follow in the devilry courage. I would like to show you this picture. I'm not getting into the debate of what US should have done, but look at the confidence in the walk of this man, Christopher Donahue. He was the general who was walking with that kind of a confidence because he knew as long as his troops are alive, as long as his troops are there with him, he can walk with that kind of a confidence. And it is also the role of the commander to be the last one after all his troops have gone to safety, thereafter to board the aircraft. And if you see, this is example which was known to the whole world, but very few know about the sacrifices of Captain Mallar. Now this was as far as the operations are valor and gallantry is concerned. Now look at our role for nation building. The main role since the independence of the Indian Armed Forces has been to hold the nation. Hold means getting it together, build the nation, ensuring peace and prosperity, and thereafter developing the nation. And that is how the prosperity has come about, because of the peace. We build the nation, we shape the nation. Look at Jammu and Kashmir. We are involved in the war of 1947-48, in the liberation of Jammu and Kashmir, and thereafter came the year 1989. Since that year till today, we are ensuring peace there. At a cost of heavy price, every day you hear about many people sacrificing their life, but they have ensured the peace there. What is important, this is a unique war. As far as Jammu and Kashmir CI operations are concerned, it is unlike any other place. In most of the counterinsurgency operations in other nations, they use attack helicopters, they use artillery, they use air force. None of these have been used in Jammu and Kashmir. And we are for the Awan there. We organized Operation Sadbhavna, and it's a typical theme is Iron Fist and Velvet Globes. We've been intimately involved in the development of Jammu and Kashmir as well. When it comes to the mission for disaster relief, whether it is from north or south, every place, whenever there has been a natural calamity, the armed forces have been there. The armed forces are also binding India, whether it is from Daulat Beg Oldie in the north to Kanyakumari in the south, the run of Kutch on the west to Wolong and Heliong and Dichu on the far east. The entire connectivity has been the handiwork of our Border Roads organization. Whether it is building of the bridges by our engineers for the Commonwealth Games or construction of the road overbridge in Mumbai, we have been involved in the nation building. Look at Atal Tunnel, Umlingla, all these places, it is entirely BRO. Our railway TAs, our eco TAs, those of you who've been to various places like Mussoorie, you would have seen how the greenery has been returned to the Mussoorie slopes. In addition to this, we've also been deeply involved in Make in India. We are absorbing technology. Our young officers themselves are technologically brilliant. We have reduced the imports, and we've also been innovating ourselves. It is a glorified form of Indian Jugaad, but it is more to do with innovation, the technological innovation. This is entirely being done by our young officers under the IDEX. Talking about the Humanitarian Aid and Disaster Relief, in short, HADR, we were the main force we are called upon before the formulation of NDRF and the SDRFs. even after the raising of these two organizations, we still continue to support them, we still continue to augment their services. May it be tsunami, earthquakes, even picking up the children out of the bore wells, floods, landslides, communal viruses. As far as the Navy is concerned, even the anti-piracy operations, security of the airspace being ensured, all these places the Indian Armed Forces have been involved. They have led the entire effort from front. During the recent COVID times, Indian Armed Forces have been very intimately involved. Establishment of the hospitals in various places, assisting the state government and the central government, distribution of the PPEs, food, masks, providing oxygen, ventilators, moving of vaccinations, medical assistance to the needy, and even the reception of the people at various locations who had been coming from abroad has been done in the most efficient and the most effective manner. We've been the ambassadors of the nation also in the UN peacekeeping. Indian contingent, believe me, is the most sought after contingent everywhere. And after having seen many countries' armies while I was there and on multiple occasions, one has interacted with the various armies, I dare say, and I say with a lot of pride and conviction, that the Indian Armed Forces are the best in the world. Our troops are definitely the best in the world. Our contingents have not only been ensuring peace in many nations like Congo, Sudan, Lebanon, Central African Republic, Mozambique, Somalia, and Ivory Coast. They have also been involved in the nation building in all these poor states. It is always the Indian contingent who are there in the forefront. We've been ensuring peace, we've been effective infrastructure development, protection of the civil population, providing them with medical assistance from our own meager resources, rescue missions, and above all, ensuring that the armed groups do not carry out any human rights violations. And this is something which has been done in the most stellar and spectacular manner. We are also carrying out a large number of joint military exercises in India and outside India. It is a perfect example of military diplomacy. From the bilateral exercises to multilateral exercises, both in land, sea and air, we've been doing trilateral exercises, tri-services exercises. There are many of them which are outside the nation, some are the inbound. Almost 25 odd exercises are being done, and we are hosting the foreign militaries, and similarly they are also hosting us. What better way of integration than this? We have our defense attaches in more than 70 nations. We are carrying out courses. We are inviting the militaries of the other nations to do courses, learn from us, learn from one of the most battle-hardened armies of the world. We also send training teams to train our friendly foreign nations' armies. This is the manner in which we are carrying out our own diplomacy in our own terms. In the sports, I must fondly quote some of those Twitter messages or also some of the social media messages. When Neeraj Chopra got the gold, somebody had pipped that finally army had to be called in to get the India the gold on the last day. Look at Dhyan Chand, Milkha Singh, Rajyavardhan Rathore, Vijay Kumar. They are the household names today. And Neeraj Chopra is the darling of the nation today. And we also not only have our own mission Olympics in the armed forces, Indian Army in particular, we also have Para-Olympic nodes. And once again, our own men who have been disabled as war veterans or the war casualties, even in the normal peacetime casualties, those who have the talent, they are being trained as Olympians. This has been talked about a lot these days. Believe me, we are not foreign to this. Interestingly, what many don't know, that women have been there long back. Our medical corps, our nursing corps is entirely women corps. We have come a long way. We are building infrastructure. We also believe in the equality. We've already got women soldiers in the CMP, the Corps of Military Police. OTA has been the place where we've been training our women officers. Now we are building the infrastructure in NDA, RIMC, and the Sainik schools to start training the women. We will be looking forward to absorb them. There would be teething problems, but definitely we are looking forward. Right now they are in the non-combat arms, but I assure you that they are in every field carrying out their task in the most professional and the most stellar manner. Not only this, even our Army Wives Welfare Association, NAVA, the Naval Wives Welfare Association, and the AFWA, the Air Force equivalent, are reaching out to the Veer Naris who have been widows in battle, or even the normal other ladies also and the women, their children, facilitating their higher education, orphanages, and they themselves have been role model in every sphere that they can be. And all the three organizations are headed by the chief's wives, and they are steering their large number of initiatives to bring succor to those veterans' wives, as also those who have been martyred in the war, looking after them and their children. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end I would say that these services have been truly a major instrument for the nation toward nation building. And it is not, if I had to describe each and every activity for the last 75 years, I would have gone in probably for 75 hours. But in the time that was available to me, this was just my small endeavor to showcase some of the contributions of the armed forces in nation building and providing leadership and examples for the youth to emulate. I would fail in my words if I don't talk a little bit about your institution. It is indeed the WIPS has been contributing in a great manner towards the leadership and also the character building, imbibing the value systems in the young and making them better citizens and who can contribute in a better manner for the development of the nation. It is in this manner we can take our great country forward, and it is not going to be long when we also start being counted amongst the superpowers. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.
What an insightful Swami Vivekananda Memorial Lecture 2021. Thank you, sir, for such a thought-provoking lecture and words. You truly took us through the 75 years of journey of nation building and the journey and contributions of military leadership from your very own experiences and examples. Such stories of courage and valor. We bow to all our heroes. Now I would request Shri Suneet Vats, Professor Siddharth Mishra, to felicitate our chief guest with our token of honor for scholarship. A shawl, a token of warmth. a memento to the cause of nation building, a replica of Swami Vivekananda, and the books on photography, The Wide Angle by Dr. S.C. Watts, Chairman WIPS, and With Love, a photograph taken by our chairman and pathfinder, Dr. S.C. Watts, which symbolizes growth and prosperity. Thank you, sir. I would now request Professor Siddharth Mishra, Chairperson, VSJMC, VSIT, and VRC, and the driving force behind organizing today's lecture, to kindly deliver the concluding remarks. Professor Mishra is a veteran journalist and also an academician of standing. He has worked in the media industry, rather continues to work for almost 3 decades now. A voracious reader and writer, Professor Mishra has authored several articles and books which have been given space by prestigious publications like Oxford University Press, Cambridge Scholars, and National Book Trust of India. He has been recently appointed as the reviewer by SAGE, the globally renowned publisher of academic journals. Professor Mishra has been part of UN study group on HIV/AIDS and has been invited to deliver lectures at prestigious universities and institutions in India and abroad. He is member of various bodies and on panel of various universities, also President, Center for Reforms, Development and Justice, a much respected think tank. For the past 3 years, Professor Mishra has been guiding and mentoring us at WIPS as chairperson of Media and IT School and also the research wing. Professor Siddharth Mishra.
General Mohanty, please. My seniors from the school, my very esteemed colleagues, Professor Subba Rao, Professor Venkata Rao, Dr. Rajiv Thakur, some of the principals from Delhi University, Dr. Ravi Narayan Kar, Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Tiwari, and others who have found time to join us today for this very prestigious lecture. We at WIPS believe in academic engagements for dissemination of knowledge, and what better dissemination of knowledge about the Indian Armed Forces we could have had, as we heard from General Mohanty today. For inviting me to speak here, Dr. Charulata Singh gave a longish introduction about me. I do not know if I deserve all that. I know myself as a storyteller. I have been a storyteller from my school time, and I continue to be a storyteller. And when the general took us on a storytelling binge, I thought I would share some stories with you which would be complementing what the general said today. He talked about the apolitical nature of the Indian military. Soon after partition, when Lord Mountbatten, then Governor General of India, visited our alma mater, then Prince of Wales's Royal Indian Military College, he advised the cadets that now that you are independent and going to be part of power, it's important for you not to dabble in politics. It was good for this country that Lord Mountbatten spoke this at the cradle of leadership, military leadership, and he did not, and it was unfortunate that he was denied the same opportunity in Pakistan. What happened to Pakistan? It's a failed state, we all know. And if we are a successful state, our military has played an immense role that goes without saying, and which has been captured by the general so very well today. Talking about, how detachment, when you talked about, Sunit, you also talked about detachment with life the karma, the karma yogi. I have had the opportunity to be part, I have not been very famous reporter about Kargil war, but I did also have a role in the Kargil war. I covered Kargil war. And for courtesy, a General Saab was sitting here in the second row. And I managed to go into very deep and very, very interiors of the things when it was happening. And there were two instances. I spent about 15, 20 days with the troops. And there are two instances which actually gave me the understanding that how does the troops function with the sense of detachment. The first one was when I was sitting for dinner with some officers and there was a sound, they said it's a mortar. And I ducked. They said, don't worry, it will not hit us. So I asked him, how do you know when it is going to hit you? He says it doesn't tell you, it hits you. So that is the way they live life. That, they are ready for it. And the second instance, he talked about the young officers, the young soldiers, and I still get goose pimples when I talk about this incident. We were visiting a unit in Punch, where a very good, and this is in 1999, in the middle of the forest, a very good PowerPoint presentation was given to me, and another officer was visiting the place. 1999 PowerPoint presentation in the field area, and I inquired, who did it? So they said he's out for a patrol. The officer is out for a patrol. It went into passing, and then I came back to Rajouri, and my host in Rajouri would find time to sit with me and discuss with me, talk with me, what all I saw during the day, and was I taken across the LOC or not? Was I made to feel how does the land in Pakistan feels and all that? So that day I was to leave next morning, and he did not join me for dinner, and a message came that there has been some casualties, so he wouldn't be able to come. So anyway, he would be there in the morning to see me off. I met him, I came back to Delhi, I opened the newspaper, and the name of the officer which was told to me who had made that PowerPoint presentation was there in the newspaper having martyred. So this is the level of contribution. He could have had a career in IT industry, but he chose the profession of arms, the noblest of the arms of this country. Sir, we at WIPS are very indebted to you for having found time for this offline lecture. As you said, this is the first time that you have come for an in-person lecture. But I assure you, you are being heard across the WIPS community. We are live on the YouTube, we are live on the Facebook, and at the last count, and this is all being done by our media college students. All the students that you see here are either the student, all the people with the cameras and the mobile phones you see here are either our students or their teachers. And we are presently being covered by a community of WIPS. We are being watched by a community of WIPS, which has 7,000 students on its rolls and about 500 faculty members. So, and this, I'm very sure, like other lectures in the past, this lecture would also find a place of prominence in the next edition of our lecture series, which is called Wisdom. Because we look for people who come and deliver the Swami Vivekananda lecture here today to give us words of wisdom, for us to pass it on to our students and the students who go out in the field, for them to practice it in life. And not taking much of your time, because there has been a request for some group photos with you. So we will be cutting short on this talk. On a lighter note, and since we have talked about our school, After I joined the college, Maharaja Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies, the students came and interviewed me, and they had my CV, my biodata in front of them, and it did not mention a degree in journalism or either a journalism school that I went to. So they asked me, which journalism school did you go to? You have not mentioned it in your CV. I said, I went to Rashtriya Indian Military College. So they asked, that's a military school, that's not a journalism school. But believe you me, the only journalism school that I have been to is the Journalism Hobby Club of RIMC. And at the age of 15, I was editor of my college magazine for the Diamond Jubilee celebrations of the school, which was released by then Chief of Army Staff, General K.V. Krishnarao. So that is the trust which that school and the confidence that school generates in you, and which is reflected on a larger platform when it comes to the armed forces. It's a divine coincidence that we are celebrating this year the 75th birth year ceremony of our founder, Dr. Vats, and also the centenary year of our school. The two institutions having come for a partnership today is a great moment for us. And sir, you touched on the topic of, and I couldn't let this go, you touched on the topic of women in the armed forces. And I would again quote a speech which was delivered at our school in 1997 when we celebrated our Platinum Jubilee. Then President Dr. Shankar Dayal Sharma, who was a doctor-in-law, he said about the cadets of the school that Veer Bhogya Vasundhara is the brave who own this world. And I think bravery is a gender-neutral word. So women should be welcomed into the armed forces. And I'm very sure your words today give us a lot of assurance on this count. Thank you so much, sir, for having been here with us today.
Thank you, sir, for in-depth concluding remarks. And there is a memento to the Institute to be given from Lieutenant General Mohanty to Shri Sunit Vats and to VIPs. Thank you so much. As Siddharth sir just told that there is going to be a photograph, so after the National Anthem, there will be one photograph here with the people from the armed forces, and I would request that after that, the faculty VIPs and the students VIPs can assemble in the reception for the photograph. As I move towards the conclusion of the session, on behalf of VIPs, I thank Lieutenant General Mohanty and a large number of people from armed forces who joined us for today's lecture. Shri Sunit Vats, Professor Mishra, all the guests and faculty VIPs, the organizing team, for being here for this Swami Vivekananda Memorial Lecture. We hope we have more opportunities and more fruitful collaborations in future. So instead of calling a curtain, I would say this is a beginning. With these words, I request everyone to please stand up for the National Anthem. Jan Gan Man Adhinayak Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidhata Punjab Sindh Gujarat Maratha Dravid Utkal Banga Vindhya Himachal Yamuna Ganga Uchal Jaladhi Taranga Tab Shubh Name Jage Tab Shubh Ashish Mange Gahe Tab Jaya Gatha Jan Gan Mangal Dayak Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidhata Jaya He, Jaya He, Jaya He, Jaya 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 He. Thank you. Now I request all the guests and everybody to please proceed for dinner.